My son and his wife locked my husband and me in the basement of our own home, shouting, "This is ours now." Sitting in the dampness, I heard my husband whisper, "Hush! They don't know what lies behind that wall." When they left, my husband moved a loose brick and showed me a secret he had kept for 39 years. Hello, dear listeners. Thank you for joining me today. Before I begin my story, I would be very happy if you subscribed to the channel and left a comment writing which state or country you are listening from. It always warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. Enjoy listening. This house knows how to breathe. I know the rhythm of its breath, as well as my own. In the morning, when the first rays of the Carolina sun break through the old magnolia trees, it takes a quiet, deep inhale, and dust motes dance in pillars of golden light. In the evening, it exhales, cooling down, and the old beams creak as if sighing, settling in for the night. I have lived here for 40 years. I have grown into these walls, or perhaps they have grown into me. My father-in-law, Albert's father, a man with a steady gaze and a wide soul, built this house. He built it not as a vacation home, but as a legacy, a place where his grandchildren and great-grandchildren would laugh, a place of strength. This morning, I was making soup as usual. Simple chicken broth with dumplings, the way my grandmother taught me. Albert eats almost nothing lately, but the aroma of chicken broth is so familiar, so like home, that it sometimes sparks a flicker of interest in him. I was cutting carrots into tiny, almost jewel-like cubes, remembering how I taught our son, Leo, to do this. He was little, standing on a stool next to me, his chubby fingers clutching a safety knife. "Mama, I'm a chef," he would shout, and we would both laugh. That laughter still lives in the grain of the kitchen table. "That tasteless slop again, Miss Miriam." The voice of Sasha, Leo's wife, burst into my memories like a draft in a warm room. "We talked about this yesterday. The internet has a million recipes. Broccoli cream soup gazpacho. Can't you master something new? It's for Leo. He needs proper nutrition." She stood leaning against the doorframe in her silk robe, arms crossed over her chest. She never called me Mom, only Miss Miriam, with a cold politeness that was worse than outright rudeness. I didn't turn around. I just kept stirring the broth. "Your husband loves this soup," I answered quietly. "And his father loves it." "Father doesn't understand anything anymore," she cut in. "But Leo deserves better. They have been living with us for 3 years, ever since Albert had his first stroke. At first, it seemed right. Families should be together, especially in hard times. I gave them the entire second floor, the master suite with the balcony overlooking the garden. Albert and I moved downstairs to his former study so he wouldn't have to climb the stairs. Gradually, their things, their habits, their smells, Sasha's sharp perfume, Leo's tart cologne, began to displace the air of this house. Last week, she moved grandfather's armchair without asking, the one with the worn armrests where my father-in-law used to read the newspaper. She shoved it into the darkest corner and hoisted some soulless white contraption of metal and leather into its place. "It doesn't fit the modern interior," she threw over her shoulder at me. I said nothing then. I just went downstairs at night when everyone was asleep and stroked the old, cracked leather of the chair the way one pets a faithful old dog. I remember how Leo used to fall asleep in it in his grandfather's arms. How I sat in it myself while pregnant, reading history books, dreaming of returning to my work at the archives when my son grew up a bit. But he kept growing. And then came Albert with his career, demanding constant attention, and my dream quietly gathered dust like old tomes in the attic. Albert lay in the study, staring at the ceiling. His body had weakened, but his mind sometimes flared with its former clarity, like an ember in a dying fire. I walked over, sat down next to him, and took his hand. His skin was dry and thin, like parchment. "How are you, my love?" I whispered. He slowly turned his head, his eyes focused on me. "They are noisy," he exhaled. Yes, they were always noisy. Their voices, their arguments about money, their loud laughter. All of it was alien to the quiet, grounded life of our home. Leo came down for lunch. He didn't say hello, sat at the table, and immediately stared at his phone. I placed a bowl of soup in front of him. He pushed it away. "Ma, we need to talk." "Seriously." Sasha instantly materialized next to him, sitting opposite, folding her hands on the table. In her eyes was that predatory glint I had learned to recognize. It meant they were plotting something. "We've been thinking," Leo began, not taking his eyes off the screen. "With the inheritance and all these complications, bureaucracy. Father is in such a state. To avoid problems later, you should sign the house over to me now. A deed of gift. It's just a formality to simplify everything." My chest went cold, not from the words themselves, but from the casualness with which they were spoken, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. "No," I said. My voice didn't tremble. "This house belongs to your father and me. As long as we are alive, everything stays as it is. So, you don't want to simplify things?" Sasha leaned forward. "You want your only son to run around government offices later, gathering certificates when, well, you understand." "I understand everything," I replied, looking her straight in the eyes. "And that is exactly why the answer is no." Leo finally raised his head. There was no filial love in his gaze, only cold, angry irritation, as if I were not his mother, but an annoying obstacle in his path. "I don't understand what the problem is. We live here. We take care of Father." "You live in my house," I corrected him. "I take care of Father." At that moment, Albert appeared in the doorway of the living room. He stood leaning against the jamb, breathing heavily. He must have heard everything. His gaze was surprisingly clear. He looked not at me, but at Leo. "You." His voice was weak, but every word rang in the ensuing silence. "You are a disgrace to our name." A disgrace. That word struck Leo like the crack of a whip. I saw his face contort. It wasn't just anger. It was the rage of a man touched in his sorest spot, his vanity, his right to bear the Whitlock name, of which he was so proud. His whole life was built on that name. "What?" he screamed, jumping up so fast the chair fell with a crash. "A disgrace. Are you out of your mind? I am the only one continuing this name. This house, it is mine by right. It should have always been mine." He stepped toward his father. I jumped up, standing between them. "Leo, stop." "No. Enough. I am tired of this." His eyes were wild. "This is ours now." He grabbed me by the shoulder, not painfully, but with authority, and shoved me aside. Then he grabbed his father under the arm. Albert was as weak as a rag doll. Leo dragged us through the hallway to the heavy oak door leading to the basement. "Leo, what are you doing?" I screamed, resisting. "You'll have time to think about your behavior," he growled. He threw the door open, and the smell of dampness and cold earth hit our faces. He roughly shoved us inside onto the top step of the steep staircase. I barely held on to Albert to keep us from rolling down. The door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. The heavy bolt clicked from the outside. We were left in complete silence, only my ragged breathing and the weak, raspy breathing of my husband beside me. I sank onto the cold stone step, clutching Albert to me. The tears wouldn't come inside. Everything had gone numb. Years of service, years of love, my whole life given to this boy, this house, this family. All of it ended here in this dark, damp basement. I was broken, shattered into pieces. And in this deafening silence, in this absolute darkness of despair, I heard my husband's quiet, tense whisper. He pressed his lips right to my ear, his words barely audible. "Hush! They don't know what lies behind that wall." My husband's words pierced the gloom, and I froze, listening. Above our heads, Leo's heavy, quick footsteps rang out, followed by Sasha's lighter, pattering tread. The front door slammed, so hard a dull echo rolled through the basement. A moment of silence, and then came the sound of an engine starting, quickly moving away and fading. They were gone. We were left alone in the cold, ringing silence of our own home, locked in its stone belly. "Help me!" Albert rasped. His voice was weak, but there was a steely persistence in it I didn't recognize. I helped him up. His body was trembling from weakness and cold. Slowly, step by step, we descended the chipped stairs to the dirt floor. It smelled of stale vegetables, damp clay, and oblivion. The only source of light was a thin strip breaking through from under the door upstairs. In this dim twilight, I could barely make out the shapes of old shelves covered in cobwebs and empty jars piled in the corner. Albert led me not to the shelves, but to the far wall, to the very masonry of the foundation. He leaned against the rough, damp stones, breathing heavily. "Here," he whispered. Father showed me when I was 18. Said it was for the most extreme case. I thought it would never come. He ran his shoulder along the wall, searching for something by touch in the gloom. Finally, he stopped. Here, press. I don't have the strength. I touched the stone where he pointed. One of the rough granite blocks seemed no different from the others. But when I pressed harder, it gave way, sliding inward with a quiet scraping sound. Behind it, a black square void opened up. Inside this niche, something dark lay hidden. I reached my fingers in and felt cold, smooth metal. It was a small tin box, an old tobacco tin, the kind popular in my childhood. I pulled it out. It was light, almost weightless. We returned to the steps and sat side by side. Albert took the box from me. His fingers struggled with the simple latch for a long time. Finally, with a quiet click, the lid opened. I expected to see anything. Old photographs, maybe a few gold coins hidden by my father-in-law for a rainy day. But inside, there was nothing shiny. Only a few yellowed papers folded in 4. Albert took out the top document and unfolded it. Even in this faint light, I saw the official seal in faded violet ink. It was a birth certificate. Read it, Albert said. I took the paper. It was fragile as an autumn leaf. The name written in calligraphy was unfamiliar to me. Cashin Vale. Place of birth, a prison hospital in Mississippi. Mother's name dashed out. Father's name, Silas Vale. I don't understand, I whispered, looking at my husband. That's me, he said quietly. That is my real name. Something snapped inside me. For 40 years, I had lived with Albert Whitlock, son of the esteemed Dr. Whitlock, heir to a famous family. And now, this fragile sheet of paper was telling me I didn't know the man I had shared a bed with, raised a son with, built a life with. He took out the next document, an adoption decree. Cashin Vale, adopted by citizen Langston Whitlock. The new son is assigned the surname Whitlock and the name Albert. Everything was certified with dry official stamps. The last item in the box wasn't an official paper, but a letter written in the familiar, confident handwriting of my father-in-law. Albert handed it to me. I read mentally, struggling to make out the words in the dark. Son, if you are reading this, it means dark times have come, and I am likely gone. I never told you the whole truth, fearing it would break your life. Your father, Silas Vale, was a brilliant scientist, an honest and brave man. But in our country, honesty and courage often become a crime. He was slandered, labeled a threat to national security, a traitor, and he perished in prison. I was his friend and colleague. I promised him I wouldn't let his son be lost. I adopted you, gave you my name, my family, to protect you, to erase the brand of a traitor's son. Live with dignity, Albert. Wear the Whitlock name with honor, but never forget whose blood flows in your veins. The blood of a brave man. I read to the end and slowly folded the letter. The cold that had started in the basement was now coming from within. It chilled me to the bone. All these years, Albert lived with the secret. He feared the shadow of the past. He protected a name that wasn't his by birthright. And Leo, our son, he built his whole life, his entire pride on this name. He boasted of his grandfather, the doctor, his pedigree, his heritage, a heritage that didn't exist by blood. All the pain, all the humiliation of the last few years, all the insults I had swallowed like bitter medicine, suddenly compressed into a single point in my chest. But it didn't explode in a scream or tears. It froze, turning into an icy, perfectly clear crystal. And in its cold facets, I saw everything with dazzling clarity. I was an archivist. I worked with documents, with facts, with histories people tried to forget or rewrite. I knew the value of truth locked in yellow paper. And what I held now wasn't just a family secret. It was a weapon. It was power. Absolute, undeniable power. We sat in the dark for 2, maybe 3 hours. Time lost its flow. Albert dozed off, leaning his head on my shoulder, exhausted by the tension. I sat motionless, staring into the darkness, and my mind, for the first time in years, worked precisely and silently like a well-oiled machine. A plan formed itself, logical and cold. Finally, noise was heard upstairs. The bolt was slid back with a sharp scrape. The door flew open and bright light hit my eyes. Leo stood on the threshold. His face was smug. Well, have you thought it over? He asked with a sneer. Father, do you feel bad? Should I call a nurse? He was clearly playing at magnanimity. It was part of his game. Yes, I said, rising. My voice sounded steady and calm, surprising even myself. He needs care. Give me the phone. I'll make a call. He was momentarily confused by my submission, but then smirked, handing me his mobile. Here. One call to arrange a nurse. And no funny business. I took the device, its warmth contrasting with the cold of my fingers. I didn't search for a number in the contact list. I knew it by heart. A few years ago, I had read an article about a female attorney specializing in complex family cases and inheritance. She was described as brilliant and uncompromising. I memorized her name, just in case. As it turned out, not in vain. I calmly dialed the number. Leo looked down at me, expecting to hear my conversation with some caregiving service. A crisp female voice answered the phone. Valerie Stone speaking. Miss Stone, good afternoon, I said evenly. My name is Miriam Whitlock. I urgently need your help. I arranged a meeting with Valerie Stone and, without changing my expression, handed the phone back to my son. He took it with lazy curiosity, scrolling the screen to check who I had called. The number was unfamiliar, without a name. He apparently decided it was a care agency, and complete satisfaction reflected on his face. He had won. The old mother was broken and had submitted. Good girl, he tossed out, more to himself than to me. A sensible decision. Come on, Sasha, let's help father up. It's not fitting for him to sit on the steps. They helped Albert to his room with that exaggerated, showy care that hurts the eyes with its falseness. They tucked him into bed, adjusted the blanket. Sasha even brought a glass of water. They were acting out a play of magnanimous victors, and I was their main audience. I watched silently, and they mistook my silence for capitulation. That was their first and main mistake. In the following days, a strange, unnatural silence reigned in the house. I performed my duties with mechanical precision, cooking broths for Albert, cleaning rooms, doing laundry. I moved through the house like a ghost, a shadow of myself, and this suited them perfectly. They stopped noticing me the way one notices old furniture. I became part of the interior, convenient and mute. And this gave me what I didn't have before, the opportunity to listen and see. They stopped hiding. They decided they could talk about everything in front of me. After all, a broken spirit is incapable of resistance. One morning at breakfast, while I was silently serving biscuits, Sasha, flipping through a glossy magazine, said to Leo, Honey, I've been thinking. That wall between the living room and father's study, it's not load-bearing. If we tear it down, we'll get a huge space, a studio. We can put a white marble bar counter right here. I froze for a moment with the skillet. The wall she wanted to demolish, my father-in-law's desk stood against that wall, where he wrote his last medical journals. Against that wall, Albert taught little Leo to write his first letters. There, on the wallpaper, if you looked closely, you could still make out a faint pencil mark. Our son's height at 5 years old. She spoke of it as if it were just an annoying hindrance on the way to a bar counter. Great idea, Leo responded, not looking up from his coffee. The study will be free soon anyway. And the library? Well, the books can be sold for scrap or recycled. Who reads them nowadays? Recycled. Books my father-in-law collected all his life. Rare editions, leather-bound volumes with gold embossing, books signed by great minds. Recycled. I placed the plate of biscuits on the table. My movements were fluid. Not a muscle on my face twitched, but inside me, something cracked and broke off. The last shard of maternal illusion that there was still something left in my son of the boy who listened with delight as his grandfather read aloud to him. They saw my calmness and mistook it for apathy, for senile detachment. They didn't understand that this was the calmness of a surgeon studying the chart of a diseased organ with cold attention before picking up a scalpel. Every word, every gesture was for me a symptom of a disease, their disease, the name of which was greed and vanity. The apotheosis of their delusion came on a Tuesday evening. They approached me as I sat by Albert's bed, reading old poems to him aloud. They entered with the same serious, concerned face as one wears when visiting the hopelessly ill. Mom, Leo began in a tone full of fake sympathy. Sasha and I have discussed everything. We understand how hard it is for you. All these worries. The house, Father. You've laid your whole life down for us. You deserve a rest." Sasha immediately chimed in, placing her manicured hand on my shoulder. The touch was light, but I felt the cold seep under my skin. "We found a wonderful place for you, Miss Miriam. A senior living community, not some nursing home. No, an elite establishment just outside Charlotte. Pine Grove. A pond, for meals a day, medical care 24/7. You'll have your own cozy room. You'll be able to walk, read, socialize with people your age. We'll visit you on weekends." They looked at me, expecting gratitude. They sincerely believed they were doing me a favor. They were offering me, the mistress of this house, a cozy room in exchange for my past, my life, everything that was dear to me. They were proposing to tear me from the soil I had rooted into and transplant me into a government-issue pot, so I would quietly wither there, not hindering them from building their life on the bones of mine. I raised my eyes to them. I looked at Leo, at his face, so like my father's, and at the same time so alien. I searched in him for at least something, a shadow of doubt, a spark of shame, but found none. There was only confidence in his own righteousness and slight annoyance that he had to waste time on these sentiments. At that moment, the last drop of my maternal love died. It didn't evaporate in anger, didn't drown in tears. It simply ceased to be, as if a spring snapped in an old clock, and the pendulum swinging for 40 years stopped forever. I looked at this man and saw before me not a son but a stranger. A calculating, cruel stranger with my eyes. And this realization brought not pain, but a strange, cold liberation. I owed him nothing anymore. Neither love, nor forgiveness, nor pity. "That is a very generous offer," I said quietly. My voice sounded hollow but steady. "I need to think." Of course. Think about it." Leo rejoiced, clearly pleased the scene had passed without tears or reproaches. "We just want what's best for you." They left, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and absolute confidence in their victory. The next day, I told Leo the first needed to go into town to the pharmacy for a rare medicine for Father. He gave me money for a taxi with an air of performing an act of the greatest charity. Sasha even helped me put on my coat. "Don't be long, Miss Miriam. Lunch needs to be ready." I nodded and left the house, feeling their condescending gazes on my back. They were watching an obedient old woman heading out to run errands. They didn't know I was going to war. Valerie Stone's office was located in a modern building in downtown Charlotte. She herself turned out to be a woman of about 40 with a sharp, piercing gaze and a complete absence of fussiness. She listened as I laid out the facts, the humiliation, the demands, the deed of gift, the basement. When I finished, she was silent for a few seconds. "Do you have any documents confirming your rights to the house?" she asked finally. "I have something more important," I answered and took the tin box from my bag. She studied the birth certificate, the adoption document, my father-in-law's letter. I saw her expression change. Professional interest was replaced by surprise, and then by the concentration of a strategist who has been dealt a winning trump card. "Mrs. Whitlock," she said, "this changes everything. Absolutely everything. The Whitlock name isn't just a surname. In certain circles, it is capital. Your son built his career, his connections, his entire status on this name. If it turns out he has no blood right to it—" "I understand that," I interrupted her. "I want my house and my peace back." "You will get much more," she said. "You will get justice. But I need time. I need to check some details. The name, Silas Vale, it vaguely reminds me of something. Let me work with this." A week later, Valerie called me. Her voice was tense, suppressed excitement in it. "I have news, and it is stunning." I pulled archives. Orion Vale wasn't just a political dissident. That's too mild a word. He was one of the leading theoretical physicists of his time, a genius. In the late 60s, he was part of a project of national importance, but he had his convictions. He refused to participate in development that, in his opinion, could lead to catastrophe. They fabricated a case. He was accused of treason. His name was erased. But in narrow academic and government circles, his name is still remembered not as the name of a scientist, but as the name of a traitor, a stain that, in those circles, doesn't wash away even after a generation. She paused. Your son Leo builds his business on connections. He prides himself on his lineage. His partners, his clients, these are people for whom reputation, purity of name, continuity of generations is everything. They do business with the grandson of the renowned Dr. Whitlock. And now imagine what will happen to his business, to his position in society, when it turns out that he is actually the grandson of Silas Vale, a man whose name for them is synonymous with treason. There it was. That was the weapon I had thought of. But it turned out to be not just a pistol. It was a bomb capable of not just winning back my house, but destroying the entire world my son had so carefully built for himself. This will destroy him socially, professionally, financially, Valerie finished. For him and his wife, that is worse than death. I hung up the phone. I sat in the kitchen in silence. The sun shone through the window. Everything was as always, but the world had changed. The stakes in this game had risen to the heavens. It was no longer about an old house and a humiliated mother. It was about the total destruction of my son's life. And I felt no horror, no pity, no maternal instinct that should have screamed inside me, protecting my child, whatever he might be. I felt only cold, eerie satisfaction. A sense of perfect, calculated justice. You wanted to take my house. You wanted to throw me into a home. You wanted to erase my life like an unnecessary entry in a book. Fine. Let's see what it's like when your life is erased. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Valerie Stone stood on the threshold in a sharp, dark suit, a thin leather briefcase in her hands. Behind her stood an official-looking man. Leo Albert Whitlock, she asked in an even, businesslike tone. Yes. And who are you? My name is Valerie Stone. I represent the interests of the owner of this house, Miriam Whitlock. This is for you. She handed him a thick envelope. It contained a formal notice of eviction and a copy of Langston Whitlock's will, naming me sole heir. What followed was a chess match played in my living room, then in their city apartment, before gathered relatives and partners. Leo and Sasha presented their forged deed of gift. Valerie presented the handwriting analysis and the fact that the notary had been dead for 2 years. I spoke not of emotion, but of legacy. I placed my father-in-law's letter on the table, the letter about love, duty, and saving an orphan boy. I juxtaposed the nobility of a true family legacy with the greed of their forgery. I didn't reveal the full truth about Cash and Vale. I didn't have to. The damage was done by the mere suggestion that the family lineage was not what it seemed. I saw the understanding dawn on the faces of his business partners, the cold withdrawal. His primary capital, his name, turned to dust before their eyes. They left without a word. His world collapsed in a single afternoon. 6 months have passed. Autumn has come. The house is quiet, a healing quiet. Albert passed away, quietly at the end of summer. I held his hand. We talked of our youth, our first date. I buried him next to Langston Whitlock. 2 noble men, now side by side. Leo and Sasha disappeared. They sold their things, moved to a small town. I heard she works as a receptionist. He does nothing. He didn't call. He simply ceased to exist for me. Today, I went down to the basement. It is no longer a crypt. It is my sanctuary, my personal archive. The workers whitewashed the walls, installed bright lights, built pine shelves. In the center is my large, sturdy work table. I am finally the author of my own story. I placed Langston's letter in a new album. Next to it, I placed a photograph of myself at 20, a history student at college, full of hope. The me I had buried. I found her again. I finished my work and walked to the small, high window the workers cut at my request. It looks straight out into the garden. From down here, I see not the trunks of trees, but their roots going deep into the earth. I see fallen leaves that will become soil for new life in the spring. I took a sip of tea. It was quiet in the house, quiet in my soul. For the first time in many, many years, I didn't feel like someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's daughter-in-law. I was simply Miriam, a woman looking out the window of her house at her garden. A woman defined no longer by her past sacrifices, but by the calm, conscious future she built for herself. I was free. Absolutely, completely, until my very last breath. Free. That is where my story comes to an end. Thank you for spending this time with me. If it resonated with your soul, please like and subscribe to the channel. Your feedback is the greatest support. I wish you peace in your heart and warmth in your soul. Until we meet again.